It was a night of great anticipation on American television. The renowned liberal host Diane Carter, known for her provocative interviews and sharp political analyses, had landed an unexpected guest for her primetime show. None other than Melania Trump. Diane was famous for pulling no punches. Her questions were as sharp as blades, and her guests often left the studio emotionally drained. For many, the idea of Melania, frequently criticized in the media for her reserved demeanor, accepting the invitation seemed absurd. However, to everyone's surprise, she accepted without hesitation. On the day of the interview, the studios were in a frenzy. Producers scurried about, adjusting cameras and ensuring every detail was perfect. The audience was eager, knowing Diane wouldn't make things easy for Melania. "Get ready," Diane told her team before going on air. "Tonight will be historic." Melania Trump arrived at the studio with her characteristic elegance. Wearing an impeccable pantsuit, she entered with steady steps, politely greeting the production team and the audience. There was an air of tranquility in her demeanor, as if nothing could shake her calm. Backstage, Diane observed Melania through a monitor. "She is elegant, I'll admit," Diane said, smiling ironically to the producer beside her. "But let's see how she handles tough questions." As the countdown to the show began, Melania took her place on stage, sitting in a chair opposite Diane's. The theme music began, and the lights came on. "Good evening, America," Diane said, smiling at the camera. "Tonight, we have a special guest. A woman who has been both admired and criticized over the years. Please welcome First Lady Melania Trump." The audience clapped politely, but there was tension in the air. Everyone was expecting a showdown. After a few introductory questions about humanitarian projects and life after the White House, Diane decided to change the tone. She leaned forward, clasping her hands, and asked, "Mrs. Trump, many people say your stance during your husband's term was passive, that you never truly made your voice heard on important issues. How do you respond to that?" The audience fell silent, waiting to see how Melania would react. She smiled, but it was a smile brimming with confidence. "I believe my voice was heard in a different way. I am not the type to shout to be noticed. I prefer to let my actions speak for me. My work with children, my focus on combating cyberbullying, these were my priorities. Sometimes, saying less and doing more is the best form of leadership." The audience clapped softly, but Diane wasn't satisfied. "But some people say your actions were overshadowed by the controversies of your husband's administration. Wouldn't it have been more effective to distance yourself from some of those controversial decisions?" Melania leaned slightly forward, maintaining her calm tone. "Diane, you work in television, right? Imagine you have an entire team working on a show. If one team member makes a mistake, do you abandon the whole project or work to fix it?" "I chose to keep working." The audience murmured in approval. Diane, visibly uncomfortable, tried to change her strategy. Determined to press further, Diane asked a question she thought would put Melania on the defensive. "Mrs. Trump, your critics say your Be Best campaign was hypocritical, given your husband's controversial behavior on Twitter. How do you justify that?" The audience was shocked by the audacity of the question, but Melania didn't lose her composure. She gave a light laugh before responding. "Diane, I think you've just proven why my campaign was so necessary. Cyberbullying isn't exclusive to one person. It's a problem that affects millions, and you've just used the same behavior to frame your question. So, thank you for reinforcing the importance of my work." The audience erupted in applause and laughter. Diane was visibly unsettled, unable to respond immediately. "Touché," Diane said, forcing a smile. As the interview continued, Melania remained in full control, answering every question with intelligence and grace. The audience, who had initially expected her to falter, was now visibly impressed. In the end, Diane, defeated, asked, "Mrs. Trump, what is your greatest takeaway after so many years in the spotlight?" Melania responded with a smile. "I've learned that people will judge you no matter what you do. So the best thing to do is stay true to yourself, work hard, and remember that, in the end, what matters is how you feel about what you've done." The audience gave her a standing ovation. Diane ended the program with a forced smile, but knew she had lost the battle that day. As the studio lights dimmed and the show ended, Diane Carter sat for a few seconds, still processing what had happened. It wasn't common for her to leave an interview overshadowed by her guest. Backstage, her team seemed nervous, exchanging silent glances. Melania Trump, on the other hand, left the stage with the same calm she had entered. She greeted a few production members, thanked the director for the professionalism, and walked toward the exit with her head held high. In the hallways, whispers were already spreading. Producers and assistants were commenting on how Melania had disarmed Diane with sharp answers and an unexpected tranquility. "I've never seen Diane so caught off guard," murmured one assistant. "I think this interview is going to be one of the most talked about episodes in the show's history," replied another. As Melania left the studio, a small crowd of reporters and fans awaited her at the exit. Even though she was accustomed to media attention, she was surprised by the warm reception. "Mrs. Trump, your response about Be Best was brilliant," shouted a reporter. "How do you stay so calm under pressure?" asked another. She simply smiled and replied, "Calm comes from confidence. And confidence comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for." In the hours that followed, the interview began dominating social media. Clips of Melania firmly and gracefully responding to Diane's questions quickly went viral. Hashtags like #MelaniaDestroysDiane and #BeBestInAction topped the trending topics. Comments flooded Twitter and Instagram. Never underestimate Melania Trump. She showed today that true strength lies in class and intelligence. This interview was a masterclass in how to defuse criticism with grace. Diane Carter finally met her match. Melania was incredible. Even staunch critics of Donald Trump admitted that Melania had performed remarkably well. Some political commentators began questioning the narrative around her, acknowledging that the First Lady might have more depth than previously perceived. Months later, the interview between Melania Trump and Diane Carter was regarded as a milestone in media. For many, it served as a reminder that power doesn't have to be loud to be effective. And for the audience, the lesson was clear. Sometimes, the most impactful answers are not the loudest but the most thoughtful. The end.